Yeah, so keep in mind the three core constructs of identity, the authentication, authorization, and governance. But what this is really doing is it's taking a look at the zero trust maturity model. I'm going to talk about ZTMM Plus first, because if we look at our overall blueprint, ZTMM Plus is in our phase one of our zero trust blueprint. But inside of there's a whole lot of functions that we have to talk through, right? And so every cybersecurity program, as you look at ZTMM, or if you look at other policy, or if you look at other maturity models, there are a very defined set of functions, specifically CISA. We spend a lot of time talking about CISA maturity model, and there's a limited set of functions in there that doesn't cover everything. So I think next gen identity has to be, or the ZTMM plus, that we've extended those functions across, in this case, identity, the identity pillar. We've created what I would say is a more holistic view of what happens in an identity environment. For a perfect example, if you scroll down just a little bit on that page, you'll see what we have there is 7 functions that really define what's in identity. And what I've done here is I've said, listen, this is what I see a lot of organizations do. When you look at user authentication, when you look at non-PE or non-person entity authentication, or you look at identity stores, this is what you see a lot of your small, medium, and in some cases, large enterprises do today, right? This is not fictitious. Unfortunately, I wish it was 20 years ago and they were doing this 20 years ago and it's changed, but it hasn't, to be fair. Looking at the conventional side, this is where most organizations are. Now, let's be fair. Not everyone is here. There are some very mature organizations out there with identity that do some other things. But this is where I see a lot of organizations sit. They sit here, they lie here, and they don't do a whole lot of new stuff. The one thing you mentioned, Jason, the lifecycle management. Right? They create a process, whether they're using a governance solution or a lifecycle management solution, they create a process that creates identities. It's probably integrated with a ticketing system just to keep track. But in a lot of cases, it's still automate our manual processes that potentially an administrator of an application or an environment has to go manage at the end of the day. And then there's no circling back to say, this has been done. That I wish I could say that wasn't still the case, but it still is in a lot of organizations.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. And it's when we do these assessments, I think that we're not surprised by areas of maturity, but we are, I think, I would say we are definitely pleased by the openness that organizations have a discussion of this, because when you do these assessments, when you try to figure out where you are, it's important in your organization to make sure people realize, no, this isn't a criticism, this isn't an audit, this isn't going on anyone's performance review. It's not intended to make anyone look bad. What it is simply the organization has decided, maybe explicitly decided or maybe implicitly decided, but they have decided to invest in this area and not invest in that area, prioritize this and deprioritize that. And there should be maybe a little embarrassment, but there shouldn't really be anything deeper than that where you say, yeah, our identity, our Active Directory system is a mess. We have 1,000 employees and we have 2,000 groups, and we don't know very much about most of those groups. That's a pretty normal, typical situation. And it's a little embarrassing. People can chuckle about it. And that happens because it's just never been a priority and there isn't good documentation, et cetera, et cetera. So that's just an example of in many cases where you do this to recognize that we are where we are and let's figure out what to move forward and how to make this stuff better. And in my mind, it all comes back to governance, which is you're in a hole, let's stop digging, let's make it so that moving forward, forget solving this big giant mess that we have. Let's at least structure things so that moving forward, every step we take, every process, every day when we're doing things, we're making it a little bit better. Every time we hire a new user, for example, let's make sure they have the appropriate tags and roles and entitlements that are in the right groups. Now, so that's going to change things 0.5% a week, that kind of thing. And then we can go back and say, all right, how do we get to this long tail of the 98% of users, et cetera? Let's talk a little bit about this catalyst column, Jerry, and then what next-gen identity looks like.
Yeah, and that leading down the path, you said that the whole ZTMM Plus, with that being in the first column or the first phase of our blueprint, the auditing, all that, oh, that's fantastic. So when we get into the later phases of the blueprint, this is where this comes in, right? You and I, when we do these workshops, when we work with customers, we spend some time talking or thinking through, okay, what is it going to take to change? right? Is there capabilities? Is there process? What is it that's going to really take to change? So to go from some of the conventional elements here to the next gen identity, which is capabilities in a lot of situations, you have to really review what does it take, right? From a user authentication perspective, let's be very clear. We have figured out authentication over the last 10, 15 years.